Good afternoon. I call this hearing to order and welcome to our witnesses. A good friend of the committee's, the Honorable Bill Evanina, former director of the National Counterintelligence and Security Center. He is the founder and CEO of the Evanina Group, and in many ways, a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, he's worked on with this members of this committee on for many years. Anna Puglisi, Anna, senior fellow at the Center for Security and Emerging Technology, or CSET, at Georgetown University, and on WebEx, Matt Pottinger, the distinguished visiting fellow at the Hoover Institute and former deputy national security advisor, I think, at the White House. Today, the committee will examine the counterintelligence threats posed by the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party. We will look at the PRC's activities within the United States as it works to acquire critical U.S. technologies and intellectual property, hack into the U.S. cyber networks, and conduct influence operations to shape narratives to be more favorable to the PRC and the CCP. I hope the witnesses will also discuss their recommendations for better countering the CCP's efforts in the United States. Now, the Intelligence Committee, as Senator Burr often reminded us, doesn't normally hold open hearings, but Vice Chairman Rubio and I believe this story needs to get out to the American public. Several years ago, the committee, in a bipartisan way, thanks in part to Senators Rubio, Burr, Cornyn, and Collins, convened a series of classified sessions with leaders from the intelligence community and leaders from the private sector, tech, finance, venture capital, academia, to brief them on efforts by the CCP to target their industries. I've wanted for some time to take those briefs and move them into an open hearing so that the U.S. public, including the private sector, our academic institutions, our media outlets, and others can better understand these threats and how we, as a society, can counter them. Because the truth is, the government cannot counter the CCP's actions all by itself. One of the most important areas that I hope the witnesses will address is how China is focusing on targeting key U.S. technologies for both acquisition and development. These include aerospace, advanced manufacturing, AI, biotech, data analytics, semiconductors, renewables, all in order to ensure PRC's future dominance in these areas. We saw this play out in many ways, and again, I think this committee was one of the first to notice the CCP's efforts in their pursuit of 5G technology with backing of Huawei. And I'm proud that this committee's work in sounding the alarm on the threat of what would happen if networks all around were reliant on a sole source Chinese provider in 5G. That would threaten both our national security and our allies' security. I hope the witnesses will also address how the CCP is using a variety of methods to acquire these capabilities, including cyber and traditional espionage, but also using a lot of the tools of business, joint ventures, acquisitions, mergers, and increasingly strategic investments by firms that at the end of the day are answerable to the Communist Party leadership in Beijing. They're also creating a series of partnerships with universities, in many ways, oftentimes luring some of those universities into trips or sinecures that sometimes put that academic research at risk. We also know increasingly we're seeing their malign influence efforts to affect policy decisions that we in the Congress make. Matter of fact, the FBI has estimated that China's theft of simply American intellectual property, not worldwide, just American intellectual property, runs from between $300 to $600 billion a year. According to the DOJ, 80% of all economic espionage prosecutions brought by the DOJ allege conduct that would benefit the Chinese state. And 60% of all trade secret theft cases have some nexus to China. FBI Director Wray told this committee in April that the Bureau has more than 2,000 operations going on, investigations, that tie back to the Chinese government. And this is one of the most stunning facts he laid out. He opens up a new investigation into Chinese espionage every 10 hours. The director also attested that no other country represents more of a threat to the United States, its economic security, and democratic ideals than China, and that China's ability to influence American institutions is, quote, deep, wide, and persistent. Ceding leadership across these technology sectors would have major repercussions for U.S. economic and national security. Let's not forget that in most ways, since World War II, the United States has led in both scientific research and the development of transformational technologies. It's this leadership that has translated into decades of economic success for U.S. companies and our military capabilities. As part of our technological leadership, the U.S. or like-minded democracies also set the global standards and protocols for new technology. And many of the times, we can implant in those standards, in those protocols, our values: democracy, transparency, diversity of opinion, and respect for human rights. And that is a long-term value to our country that I don't think is often factored in. I've been frustrated, though, by the frequency by which U.S. companies, in their desire for market access in China, have frankly given up sometimes on those values and sometimes facilitated and enabled the PRC to acquire sensitive U.S. technologies. The idea they can't miss the Chinese market means they make sacrifices going into that market they would make in no other nation in the world. China, in turn, uses these technologies to advance its own illiberal vision, to surveil and control its population, stifle the free flow of information, and repress foreign influence campaigns worldwide. These technologies enable the PRC to suppress dissident and restrict religious groups. We see that whether it's in Xinjiang or in Hong Kong. As we think through what the CCP is doing in the United States, I want to make crystal clear, though, my concerns lie squarely with the President of China, Xi Jinping, and the Chinese Communist Party leaders, not the people of China, and certainly not with Chinese or other Asian Americans who have contributed so much to our society. Our answer to these challenges cannot be to keep talented folks out of the United States. In fact, we've seen in my state of Virginia, Northern Virginia particularly, a technology hotbed, literally 40% of all the startups are started by first-generation Americans. So it is in our national interest to welcome these talented Chinese academics, entrepreneurs, and technologists, and in fact, make it more attractive for them to use their talent to bolster our economy, rather than simply going back to China. This is, again, where our values come into play. And Americans should also be aware that the PRC's pressures and coercion efforts don't stop with the diaspora or Chinese nationals living in the United States. As Senator Rubio will point out, increasingly, the CCP is focused on pressuring U.S. citizens, entities, and businesses across industries to, again, shape a narrative that advances their goals. Even for this hearing, a number of potential witnesses declined to participate in an open format for fear of retribution to themselves or their families. From the PRC's pursuit of critical and sensitive technology to its repression at home and coercion abroad, and its focus on trying to win the technology battle in the 21st century, it's clear that I think our country is facing a new Sputnik moment, where we must take steps to remain competitive, especially in technology, and find better ways to strengthen our defenses against the CCP's myriad intelligence, tech acquisition, and foreign influence operations. Because we're back into this kind of semi-hybrid system today, for today's meeting, we will be asking questions by order of seniority, and as Senator King has made clear, with the 5-minute rule applying. Thank you. I now turn to the Vice Chairman.
Thank you.